So I've gotten to the mid-back, but before I continue, I'm going to stuff the body of the doll. Now there's a couple of ways that you can do this. If you want, you can just stuff the top as you would normally and just fill up the whole space. Or if you would like to have a doll with a little bit more of a realistic looking cleavage line, you can just push the two sides so that they separate like that, and then stuff each side individually. And then fill in any other empty space with some more fiberfill. And if you want, you can outline this with some thread in order to give it a more defined line, but I'm just going to leave it like this and stuff the rest of my doll. And whenever I dress the doll, it'll just hold its shape like that. So I'm just going to continue to stuff this doll. And if you want, you can do the same thing to the back and just press them together. But I'm not going to do that for the back of my doll. So as you can see, I've finished stuffing my doll for now. And I have single crocheted to the middle back. So now I'm going to create the legs. So to create the legs, I'm going to chain 2 first. And now I'm going to single crochet onto the front middle opposite from where I ended my last row. So I'm going to find the stitch that is about at the middle of the front, and I'm going to pull up a loop, and then I'm going to single crochet. And now I'm going to turn the work around, and I'm going to single crochet all the way around until I get back to the middle back here where I've put these 2 chains. So I'm just going to single crochet around the left leg until I get to my chains. So I've single crocheted until I got to my chains, and now I'm going to single crochet into those 2 chains. Now I'm only going to go into the loop that is closest to my left leg that I'm working on right now. So I'm going to go into that inner loop, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Now I'm going to do the same thing into the next chain. I'm going to just go into that loop on this side, pull up a loop, single crochet. And now I'm going to single crochet into that first stitch that I started once I finished my chains. And I'm going to mark that as the first stitch of my row. So I've just completed 1 row of the leg, and I'm going to go on until I have a total of 17 rows of the leg. You can make your doll's leg as long or as short as you like. It really depends on what character you're making, what the size of the doll is, and I'm just going to add 16 more rows. So I'm going to continue to mark my stitch for the for the first stitch of my row, so that I don't lose track of how many rows I've done. So now I'm just going to do 16 more rows of single crochet. So I've gotten to the end of my 17 rows for the leg, so now I'm just going to add some fiberfill to the leg. Okay, so I've gotten to the end of 17 rows for my first leg. So I'm going to do 3 more rows to do the foot. I'm going to do the first stitch of my row and mark my stitch. And now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the front of the foot, which is going to be around here. And I'm going to add 2 increases to the front of the foot so that it can start to get longer in the front. So I'm going to single crochet until I get to the middle of the front of the foot. Okay, here I am at the front, so I'm going to add one increase here, go back into that stitch and single crochet again, and then I'm going to do another increase in the next stitch. So there's one and one more for my increase. And now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the end of my row, and then I'm going to do this again 2 more rows. Okay, I've gotten to the end of my row and I've marked my stitch. So now I'm going to go back to the front middle where I increased in the last row, and I'm going to add 2 more increases. Okay, here I am at the front middle. So I'm going to increase the next 2 stitches. Back into that stitch, single crochet again. And now the next one I'm going to increase as well. So there's 1 and there is 2. So now I've got 2 rows of increase, and as you can see, the front of the foot is getting a little bit longer. So I'm going to do 1 more row of increase. I'm going to go all the way around until I get back to the front of the foot, and I'm going to increase 2 more times. Okay, I've gotten to the front of the foot again, so I'm going to increase the next 2 stitches. Okay, there's my first increase, and now the next one. Okay, so now I've done all of my increases for the foot, but if you want your doll to have slightly larger feet, then you can do another row of increase, or however many rows, depending on how big your doll is and how big you made the legs. And I'm just going to continue and finish this row up, and then I'm going to single crochet for 1 row to make the length of my foot a little longer going this way. Okay, I've gotten to the end of my row and I've marked my first stitch of my row. So I'm going to single crochet all the way around for 1 row just to make the leg slightly longer. Now you don't have to do this depending on how big your doll is and how you want it to look and how long you want the leg to be. But I'm going to go single crocheting around for 1 row without adding any more increases. So I finished with my 1 row of single crochet after increasing for the foot. And now I'm going to start to decrease so that I can close up this leg. I'm going to do the first stitch of my row. Now I've counted all of my stitches that I have left, and I have 19. And in order to decrease, I'm going to want to decrease 6 times in this row. So I'm going to decrease every second stitch so that I will be decreasing so that I can be decreasing 6 times in the row. But depending on how big you made your doll's legs and feet, you might need to decrease by a little bit more. Just make sure that you're decreasing 6 times in each row of the foot. So I've done my first stitch already. I'm going to decrease the second. So I'm going to pull up a loop and pull up a loop in the next and crochet together. In the next one, I'm just going to do a single crochet, and then I'm going to decrease the next. So pull up a loop in the next, and crochet together. And I'm going to continue doing this all the way around until I get back to my stitch marker. Okay, I've gotten to the end of my row. And in this next row, I'm going to decrease every stitch. But before I do, I'm going to add a little bit more fiberfill to my doll's foot. So I've gotten back to the beginning of my row, and I just removed my stitch marker. And in this row, I'm going to decrease every stitch. So I'm going to pull up a loop in the next, and crochet together. And I'm going to mark that stitch as the first stitch of my row. And now I'm going to decrease every other stitch of the row. So this next stitch is the last stitch of my row, and I have one stitch left over, so I'm going to decrease the last stitch with the first stitch of the row. But first I'm going to add just a little bit more fiberfill before I close up the foot all the way. Okay, I've stuffed the foot a little bit. Now I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and I'm going to decrease one more time. If you don't have an odd number of stitches, if you were able to just decrease every stitch of the row, then you don't have to do this. But since I had an odd number of stitches, I'm just going to decrease the last and the first stitch of my row. And then I'm going to slip stitch to the next stitch. Next, I'm going to cut off my yarn, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a long tail. And I'm going to pull that loop through so that my work will be done. And now, as you can see, there's a small hole at the bottom of the foot. I'm going to use this tail to sew this hole closed. Okay, I've threaded my yarn on my yarn needle. So now I'm just going to go into every stitch of the row and sew through. And when I'm finished, I'm just going to pull this tail to tighten. Okay, I've gone through every stitch. Now I'm just going to pull on this tail until that hole closes up. And now I just need to sew this end in. Now that I've finished making this leg, I'm going to work on the other one. I'm going to start again where I left off here, and I'm going to pull up a loop here at this edge, right after where I started my other leg. So I'm going to insert my hook into this stitch right here that is right after where I started the other leg. And I'm going to pull up a loop of the same color yarn. And then I'm going to chain one. Now for the other leg, I ended up with a total of 13 stitches all the way around. So I'm going to try to keep it to around the same amount of stitches. And I'm just going to single crochet around this side of the leg. So I've gotten to this part of the leg that is going to be on those loops that I left from the chain that I put in the middle here. When I did this leg, I only worked on the loops that were on this side. So here are these two loops. There's one here and one here. So I'm going to work into those two loops once I get to the middle. Okay, so I'm right here at the middle. I'm going to just go into that first loop that I left from my chain. I'm going to pull up a loop and single crochet. Then I'm going to go into that second loop from my second chain, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Okay, now that I have done with those 2 stitches, I've gotten back to where I first started my leg. So I'm going to go into that chain that I made, and that's going to count as my first stitch of the row. So I'm going to pull up a loop through that chain and single crochet, and I'm going to mark that stitch as the first stitch of my row. So now I'm just going to single crochet in the rest of the stitches all the way around until I get back to my stitch marker. But I'm going to do 16 more rows of single crochet just like I did on this leg, so that the both of the legs will be the same length. So I've finished with my 17 rows of single crochet, and I have added my fiberfill to my leg. And now I'm just going to do exactly the same thing that I did to finish this leg, and I'm going to do 3 rows increasing at the front to make the foot, and then I'm going to decrease to close off the foot. So I'm just going to do the same exact thing that I did for this one. So I've gotten to the front of the foot. Now I'm just going to increase 2 times, just like I did for the foot on the other side. And I'm going to do 2 more rows, increasing twice at the front to create the foot. So as you can see, I've finished with both of the legs now. So now the only thing I need to do is to make and attach the arms to the shoulders. So as you can see, I've made one of the arms here. I'm going to attach it to the shoulders on this side. But I'm going to show you how to make the other arm because they're both exactly the same. I'm going to start with a double magic circle just like I did at the very beginning of my work. I'm going to wrap my yarn around my fingers twice. Then I'm going to, through the middle of those 2 loops, I'm going to pull up a loop and chain 1 more, and now I'm going to single crochet 7 more times onto my loops. Now if you want your doll to have really thin arms, then you would only need to crochet 5 more times onto these loops so that you have a total of 6. Or if you want to have even wider arms, then you would also need to put 6 stitches in total, and then you would increase the next rows. So since I'm only going to do 8 stitches in total, I'm not going to increase my doll's arms. So I'm just going to do 7 more single crochets onto my loops. Okay, now I have my total of 8, so I'm going to close my magic circle. I'm going to do it just like I did at the beginning of my work. Pull slightly on the tail, find the smaller loop, pull on that loop from the side closest to the tail until the other loop closes completely, and then pull on that tail until the second loop closes. So here is going to be the foundation for my arm. Again, if you wanted to have thinner arms, then you would only need to do 6 stitches instead of 8. Or if you're going to make bigger arms, then you would need to make 6 stitches instead of 8 and then increase this row. So just like we did at the beginning of the work, you would, in the next row, you would increase every stitch. Then after that, you would increase every other stitch. Then you would increase every third stitch, and so on, until you got the thickness that you wanted for your doll's arms. But I'm not going to increase my doll's arms. I'm just going to leave it at these 8 stitches. So I'm going to do 17 more rows all the way around. I'm going to do my first stitch, which is going to be that chain 2 that I made. Okay, there's my first stitch of the row. So I'm going to take my stitch marker and mark that first stitch so that I can keep track of how many rows I've done. And now I'm just going to do 17 more rows of single crochet. And you can do as many rows or as few rows as you want. It depends on how big you made your doll. Okay, so I've gotten to the last stitch of my row, and I've finished with 16 more rows, and I have a total of 17 and my magic circle. So now I'm going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the row to end my piece. And I'm going to cut off a long tail so that I can use it to attach the arm. Now I've already stuffed my arms a little bit. I've been adding fiberfill as I went with my 16 rows. So I'm just going to finish adding the rest of the fiberfill now. So I've added the last of the fiberfill to my 2 arms. So to attach them, first I'm going to fold them in half, and I'm going to make sure that the tail is on the edge. And now I'm going to attach the arms. I'm going to use my hook and the tail to attach my arms. If you want, you can just sew the arms to whatever spot on the body that you want them to be. But I'm going to be using slip stitches to attach the arms to the body because the doll that I'm making will end up having a strapless look, so her shoulders will be more visible, and I just think it looks a little bit more clean. So I'm going to insert my hook through the first stitch on this side and the first stitch on the opposite side. And then I'm going to find where on my doll's shoulder I want to place my arm. And it doesn't really matter where you put the arm as long as it's evened up on both sides and as long as it's in this general area. So I'm going to pull a loop through that spot on the body where I've decided to start my arms. And then I'm going to pull that loop through where I've put my hook on the arm. And now I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch on both sides, so into this stitch and into this stitch. So I've got my hook through both. And now I'm going to go to around the same area of the body, and I'm just going to pull up a loop right next to where I pulled up a loop last, pull it through both of those loops at the top that I went through, and then pull that loop through the loop on my hook. And there's my first slip stitch. So now I'm going to do the next one, which is going to be my last slip stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook through the last stitch on both sides, and then I'm going to go to the next stitch right where I've been adding my arms, pull up a loop there, then I'm going to pull that loop through these two loops of the arm and pull it through the loop on my hook. And then to finish, I'm just going to chain one and then pull my yarn through. And now one of the arms is attached, and now I'm just going to sew this end in, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side with the other arm. Okay, so I finished sewing in the end for this arm, and now I'm going to do the same thing to this side to attach the other arm. So once again, I'm going to start by inserting my hook into the first stitch on both sides. So just like that. And then I'm going to try to find the same spot on the opposite side as where I ended my other arm to start this other one. Okay, so I've found the stitch where I'm going to start, so I'm just going to pull that loop through the body, then pull it through the arm. And now I'm going to do my first slip stitch. So first I'm going to insert my hook into both sides of the arm, just like that. Then I'm going to go into the next stitch. And pull up a loop, pull it through the arm, and then pull it through the loop on my hook. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time into the next stitch. And now to end, I'm just going to chain one and pull my yarn through. And now I just need to sew in this last end. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more tutorials like this in the future, then please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!